Hi, my name is Dr. Katie Kresser, and I'm an art history professor at Seattle Pacific University in Seattle, Washington. Thanks for joining me for this lecture titled Priceless: Art and Luxury in a Low-Res World. This lecture is the 2020 installment of Seattle Pacific University's Weider Lecture Series. In this lecture, I'm going to illuminate some contemporary issues in our media landscape with a little bit of help from the worlds of art history and art theory. So let's get started. What you see here is one of the most celebrated and notorious artworks of the 21st century. Well, it wasn't made in the 21st century, but it was arguably during our 21st century that it has made the biggest splash. This is the Salvator Mundi, or Savior of the World, attributed to Leonardo da Vinci. It shows a serene and elusive Christ raising his right hand in blessing while holding a crystal orb, symbolizing the cosmos, in his left hand. Leonardo likely made this painting in the year 1500, and over the years, as it changed hands, it became cracked and damaged and was painted over. It was cleaned and restored in 2006 and was exhibited in London in 2011 as an authentic Leonardo. In 2017, after going on a world tour that included museums in Hong Kong, San Francisco, and New York, the painting was sold at auction for more than $450 million. That makes it the most expensive artwork ever sold. This image raises lots of questions, and lots of people have opinions about it. Some like it, some don't. Some don't think it's by Leonardo at all. But for our purposes, the most important question is this one. What makes a painting worth the GDP of a small country? How did it ever come to this? Setting aside questions of political intrigue, because experts think there was a Middle Eastern power struggle behind the bidding war for this artwork, how did we come to a place where artworks could command such high prices? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is this. It's kind of obvious. Images are powerful. The images we consume shape our consciousness. They are potent, almost magical, almost mind-controlling. To own a lost image of, well, God by a legendary great master is almost to wield a kind of magical power. The power of images is pretty well known, and that's why there's so much debate today about representation in media, about censorship, about inclusivity, about beauty standards, and all that stuff. The power of images goes very deep. We know that the images we consume shape the way we interact with other people and even conceive of our own identities. What we may not understand as well, though, is that the images we consume shape our understanding of the spiritual world, of the higher things that go on above us and shape us and guide our destinies. The Bible talks about this because, well, Jesus understood everything. Here are some Bible verses. Quote, "The eye is the lamp of the body. So, if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" That's Matthew 6:22 and 23. So what we look at, what we take in, illuminates us and teaches us. That's just how being human works. We're constantly absorbing information from the great communication that is the cosmos all around us. We're made to do that, and that's how we grow. That's how we become more human, ideally more ourselves. That's how we get closer to our eternal destiny. That's how we grow toward truth and clarity. But what if the light we take in is actually darkness? How great is that darkness, Jesus says. Man, that's bad. We've got to watch out. Here's some more verses. Quote, "For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. That's Romans 8:7. This is from the Apostle Paul, and he doesn't mean flesh in a really limited literal sense. By flesh, he means all kinds of worldly things that are distracting. All of them keep us from seeing God. And finally, the Apostle Paul also says, quote, "Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things," unquote. That's Philippians 4:8. How many of us actually do that? Think about the true, noble, pure, lovely, and admirable? And if we don't do that, are we taking in light that is actually dark? Here on this slide is something excellent and praiseworthy in honor of the Christmas season when I'm recording this lecture. It's a nativity scene by Duccio di Buoninsegna, who was an early master of color and texture and volume in Siena, Italy, at the dawn of the Renaissance. So, using your eyes properly is not just about avoiding bad things, like pornography and hate speech. It's also about seeking out the noble and right. Like in this beautiful painting by Sandro Botticelli. Notice how gentle and gracious this painting is. Jesus and his mother connect with watchful, attentive eyes, their faces serene and tender. Everything is covered with the faintest heavenly glow, with a serenity that lifts you out of time. And to push it a little further, and here's where the art theory comes in, it's not just about what we consume, but how we consume. Art history and theory over the last couple of centuries have taught us that striving is crucial, that difficulty and challenge when it comes to consuming media are key for maintaining a healthy mind. So needless to say, this couch potato has it all wrong. He's headed straight into a dark place. Jesus anticipated this too. Quote, "Enter by the narrow gate," he said, "for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction," unquote. That's Matthew 7:13. One art theorist who tackled this problem, and perhaps my favorite, was Viktor Shklovsky, a Russian theorist persecuted by the early Soviets. In his essay Art as Technique from 1917, he wrote these things, and I'm going to read them aloud. First, if we start to examine the general laws of perception, we see that as perception becomes habitual, it becomes automatic. Thus, for example, all of our habits retreat into the area of the unconsciously automatic. In other words, we are not thinking anymore. We're just doing, we're just taking for granted. We're becoming brainwashed. I'm going to move on to quote number 2. Shklovsky goes on to say, quote, "We see the object as though it were enveloped in a sack. We know what it is by its configuration, but we see only its silhouette." What Shklovsky is saying here, that once we become so habitualized, so automatic, we don't see things in their fullness anymore. We see them as stereotypes or flat generalities. Now I'll move on to quote number 3. So Shklovsky says, "And so life is reckoned as nothing. Habitualization devours works, clothes, furniture, one's wife, and the fear of war. If the whole complex lives of many people go on unconsciously, then such lives are as if they had never been," unquote. If we get into this habitualized mindset, Shklovsky says, we're not even fully alive. And then finally, the last quote, number 4. "Art exists that one may recover the sensation of life. It exists to make one feel things, to make the stone stony," unquote. And to make so many other things appear like their true selves as well. Shklovsky understood that the kind of communication we call artistic is for the purpose of waking us up and making us see the full richness and the intrinsic meanings of things. Therefore, when media consumption is too easy, when it habitualizes and makes us passive, it becomes blinding. According to another art theorist, Clement Greenberg, easy media pre-digests our stimuli so that we can't get spiritual nutrients from it anymore. Yet another art theorist, Walter Benjamin, called this whole process distraction, so that we become torpid and helpless and unable to see clearly and seize our destinies. Now, media consumption did used to be difficult, and that's where art history can teach us some things. Imagine what it was like before the invention of cheap printing, or digitizing, when everybody held everything in their heads because there was nothing outside to hold it for you. Imagine what it was like when you couldn't send messages quickly across distances, so that anything out of sight felt completely unknown, and the world was full of mystery. Imagine what it was like when opulent things, glamorous things, were rare and special, and people went on pilgrimages to see them. Or imagine what it was like when communication through media was difficult, all the time, everywhere, requiring major time, patience, effort, and expense. Imagine how carefully people must have chosen their images and their words, knowing what an investment they were putting forth. Imagine the years spent making this beautiful book, the Lindisfarne Gospels, a one-of-a-kind jewel telling the story of the life of Christ. So, to reiterate, none of this has to do with content, with the what. It's all about the how. It's about choosing the hard over the easy. It's about choosing restraint and deep thought over impulse. It's about accepting bigness and uncertainty, even when you're offered a false sense of instant gratification and control. But everyone knows this by now. Our culture industry today is financially incentivized to miswire your brain so that you will A, be perpetually dissatisfied, and B, obsessively come back for more only to be dissatisfied again. It is incentivized to give you shallowness. This has been going on for longer than we know. Shallowness. So, psychologically and spiritually, we're all stuck in the mud, like these jet skis stranded in Ryde Harbor, UK. We can't flow. We can't go. We don't have enough information. We don't have enough richness. We're not able to expand our minds the way we need to in the current media environment. To use a different metaphor, in terms of its capacity to describe the full symphonic layeredness of reality, our media culture is deliberately low resolution, or low res. Like the image on the right of the two flower photos below. It's deliberately withholding information to keep us dissatisfied. And in fact, I believe that modern materialistic atheism, which denies the rich dimension of the spiritual and the transcendent, is the logical outgrowth of this perverse incentive system. It actually came from it and is dependent upon it. It is, again, the logical endpoint of a hardwired need for instant total comprehension, gratification, and control. And we are all being pulled toward this endpoint, no matter what our belief system, because we participate in a media environment that promises control and makes everything way too easy. Moreover, this endpoint, the endpoint of the confident atheist who thinks he or she understands the whole universe and can ultimately control it, is presented as smart and tough. But it's childish, because it's making do with the lowest level, simplest information. So this has to stop. It has to stop. One way we can stop is by taking a break from social media and the internet in general, stat. That's the first step. The next step is to go outside and open our eyes to the real reality all around us. And when it does come to actually consuming media, another step is to lean into our yearning today for all things organic, authentic, local, and handmade, because those things are not low res. They are not shams and shortcuts. They don't give instant gratification. They're elusive and rich. Like this lino cut by the artist Barbara Earl Thomas, which is aggressively handmade and rooted in the specific life experience of the artist, who grew up in a family of fishermen going generations back. This picture isn't easy. It's hard. It demands inspection and attention. And in this way, looking at it is a good mental discipline. It was hard to make and was a labor of love, and it shows a hard life, but a good life, of work and cooperation and dependence and sacrifice. There's a harmony here between the making and the showing. Both are difficult. We need to see things like this to refresh our brains. And now I want to make another historical point. Consider this close-up of a painting by the artist Bruce Herman. Look at the effort here to scratch, layer, evoke, capture. The artist's engagement with nature here is not a sham or a shortcut, but a constant reaching towards something that can never be fully held, that always eludes one's grasp. There's a too muchness here in the artist's attempt to grasp. There's a perceptual luxury, a more-than-ness. It's more than we need to simply tell what's going on. And that's the point. Images like this that are deliberately, by definition, not shams or shortcuts, but are reaching for something that can never be held. Those things are the things we today call art. Furthermore, I believe that, historically speaking, the thing we today call art was invented in early Christian times, in the mists of the first millennium AD, to explode the shams and shortcuts of the mystery-squashing, control-obsessed, ancient Roman worldview. On this slide, we see an example of such early Christian art showing Mary and Jesus with saints and angels. It's from the year 600 AD. So the thing we call art was a hack, a technology, for avoiding humans' mental propensity toward the low res. Art said no shortcuts. What we see here is a detail from a rich mosaic from the Church of San Clemente in Rome. The thing we call art was born as the early Christian icon. And here's one of the earliest surviving icons from the monastery of St. Catherine on Mount Sinai in Egypt. It shows Christ as a ruler, holding a book of divine law and raising his hand to bless his people. This monastery was not touched by the iconoclasts or image destroyers that swarmed over the Byzantine Empire in the 8th and 9th centuries AD. Thus, icons like this were able to survive into the present day. In form, this icon is a lot like the Salvator Mundi painting we started this lecture with. Both show divine figures, the same divine figure, with intense gazes, framed in a rectangle and mounted on wood. We take this kind of small rectangular picture for granted, but in early Christian times it would have seemed fresh and new. How was it fresh and new? Well, it didn't quite fit into the categories of any of the pre-existing art forms available at the time. It was not, for example, a localized idol that claimed to contain divinity within itself, as if bringing the heavens down and making it easy for you to control them. This is the idol of Artemis of the Ephesians, from Lepsis Magna. She was considered to have power inherent in herself. She actually was the manifestation of the goddess, as if everything transcendent and divine could be contained in such a small marble package. Also, The early Christian icon was not just a sensory backdrop, like this painting from Pompeii, that was designed to make you feel good and fool your eyes, like a sort of virtual reality escape into a fake paradise. And the early Christian icon was not just a pictorial name tag attached to a specific person, either dead or alive, like a label telling you what you were getting. Images like this appeared on mummies, as you can see in the image here, and they also appeared on the exteriors of homes and shops, showing you who lived and worked inside. And finally, the early Christian icon was not just a storybook illustration, just reduplicating what a text already said, but with a little more zing, like the illustration here from the book of Genesis. Here's what the early Christian icon was. First, it was framed, that is, set apart from ordinary life. Even if it didn't actually have some literal gold frame going around it, the hard edges of the rectangle that contained it functioned as a sort of frame that set it apart. It was also unanchored. That is, unlike the Artemis of the Ephesians, it was not magically rooted to a place like an idol in a temple, but it was evocative of something everywhere, and it could be taken from place to place rather in honor of that. And third, it was indexical. That is, it had the quality of an imprint, as if it came from a complete thing, but it wasn't the complete thing. An example of an index in this sense is a thumbprint, or smoke from a fire. They're small signs that point back to something bigger. All of these are proper qualities of art as we understand it today. So in conclusion, art, properly understood, and as invented by early Christians, I think, makes us face the fact that the ultimate is not controllable. It makes us want to scream like the guy in the image over here to the right. But we've got to keep coming back to it, so that it can rewire us to accept the cosmic weirdness. This is the weirdness of an enchanted universe, where the child Jesus can appear on a riverside and ask for a ride, like in the image on the left, or where angels can descend to make books, as with the legendary Book of Kells in the center, or where there are unicorns. And there's the weirdness of the aggregate, the overlapping, and the paradoxical, as in this painting by Tintoretto of the Last Judgment, where all the good people who ever lived rise in spirals toward the God-man, who is both light and dark, both big and small, both fearsome and lovely. And it's the weirdness of the inside and outside of time, where an immortal can come and live a human life and face a grim destiny laid out from the time of his infancy, a destiny somehow already accomplished before it even began. It is the weirdness of perceptual luxury, of the too much, of the more than. It is a difficulty that beckons and rewards. For more on these topics, and especially about the importance of consuming difficult media and the spiritual rewards that can come from that, I encourage you to take a look at my book, Bezalel's Body, The Death of God and the Birth of Art, from Cascade Books. And if you want to learn more about what modern art theorists say about the importance of difficult media and the importance of getting rid of easy media, you can take a look at these links. There's Clement Greenberg's Avant-Garde and Kitsch from 1939, Victor Shklovsky's Artist Technique from 1917, and Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction from 1935. And if you have further questions or comments, feel free to get in touch. Once again, my name is Katie Kresser, and I'm a professor of art history at Seattle Pacific University. Thank you for joining me for this Weider Lecture 2020, titled Priceless: Art and Luxury in a Low-Res World.